Welcome back, everyone. Slightly longer break than anticipated. So we are now on to our next application. So it's the former White Hart pub site, 144 Kingston Road, 170 student accommodation flats, or over 170, including 35% affordable accommodation. Tim, please do introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. This is 144 Kingston Road, also known as the White Hart, the pub on the corner here. That's a two-story building. It has a single associated flat above it. Here is a MOT testing centre, and we have two accesses in from Rutlish Road, which is a local road to the side, and then the more main road, Kingston Road. Tram line along here with a tram stop just down here. An existing fairly narrow tram path leading to that tram stop. Sorry, bear with me for a moment. The site photos are actually just in a separate document. I will bring that up here. Taking you through photos of the surrounding area, just so you can get an idea of the surroundings. The buildings on site at the moment, two-story to the frontage, and a sort of more of a shed type building, commercial shed beyond. Surrounding it, you have predominantly two-story housing. There are some larger examples, and one on the street opposite, a flatted block over here, which is higher. The telephone exchange is off this photo, but further down here. And then as you move closer towards South Wimbledon, you do have some examples of buildings which are larger than those two-story suburban buildings. So the existing pub, and then a view from the site looking out towards Kingston Road, the existing buildings, and then a view. This is the pub building, and this is the MOT garage there. Some buildings in the surrounding area, which the applicant has set out in the design and access statement. And in fact, this one is the one from the scheme, but next door to the scheme that we recently had. So there, which is further down Kingston Road this way. Taking you back to the proposal. So the scheme is to demolish the pub and the MOT building and erect a building of 4 to 6 stories to provide 271 rooms of purpose-built student accommodation and a retail unit. I'll take you through the plans. Sorry, I didn't mean to have these images at the end, but they seem to have popped up earlier. So you can see the building here, but I will take you through the proposal. So it's a building of between 4 and 6 stories. Part of the proposal is a widened pavement here to provide additional public realm, a new tram path, a wider tram path resurfaced with lighting and suitable fencing to provide access to the tramway. A U-shaped building in a courtyard configuration with the higher elements at the frontage and on the corners, which then steps down in height towards the rear. The highest point of the building would be 19 meters. You can see that the existing accesses would be closed, which allows for on-street parking bays to be retained, albeit relocated. there'll be a large stretch of double yellow lines here, which would allow for residential servicing. Here you can see the ground floor, so a retail unit proposed on the corner here. Everything at ground floor is communal, so there are no bedrooms at ground floor, common rooms, joint working spaces, cycle storage and plant, along with the entry, which would be the only entry into the building, in a 24 hours manned desk there and security at other times. Here you can see the layout of the floor above, so individual rooms with shared kitchen and lounge facilities, roughly to about 8 to 10 units. Yep, 1 per 8 to 10 units, that is. And then the floor above, again, very little change in the plans there. You can just see it steps in slightly at the bottom. And then more stepping into ensure that transition in height to the lower buildings beyond. That's the roof plan, a biodiverse roof with solar panels. And here you can see the layout of some of the rooms. Here are some more detailed images showing the architectural detailing. We'd be looking at 2 tones of red brickwork and then reconstituted stone for various elements. This is the roof. Sorry, that's not come out very well. The idea of this is to show that it's a roof system which allows for a biodiverse roof beneath the solar panels, which are then raised to allow some degree of light in. In terms of street scene views, you can see this is the view which shows the transition in scale down to the lower buildings. And again, a view from the other side, so effectively from the tram tracks. And then in a bit more detail, part of the design has been the picking up on the rhythm of the surrounding area. So these recessed elements, which are made like that to reduce the visual impact of the building, create visual interest, shadow lines. And here we can see a different format for the elements on the roof, which is something that had been worked out with the urban design officer under a previous scheme. It is a 6-story building, largely with the scale of a 5-story, because the floor to ceiling heights are a bit lower than they would be for standard residential properties. And again, a view here from the rear of the courtyard. So that is the courtyard down in there. Again, more views showing sections at various points. This shows how refuse would be collected. I'll come back to this one. Sorry, not this one. This is showing how a refuse vehicle or a limited size vehicle could turn in Charles Road. So there is a condition for a restriction on sizes. So some other key things. There is a pre-booking system for the beginning and end of term to ensure that students don't all arrive at the same time. 204 cycle parking spaces. The scheme will look to get the BREEAM rating of excellent. And as well as the green roofs and solar panels, there are bio-retention systems, permeable paving and attenuation cells as part of the SUDS scheme. Moving on to the key issues, the principle of development, the loss of the public house, which is addressed in the report and considered acceptable. The loss of employment land, again, addressed in the report and considered acceptable. The new retail unit replaces an existing employment generating use, and again, is considered acceptable in planning terms. You'll note the comments about the 5-year land supply, which are the same as the previous application, that we're not hitting the 5-year land supply. Purpose-built student accommodation counts towards the housing figures. So each room, 2.5 rooms count for 1 dwelling effectively. So it's slightly scaled down, but it still would contribute quite significantly to the housing targets. The provision of student accommodation must comply with policy DM5, and you'll see that set out in the report that officers feel it does. In terms of affordable housing, the scheme would meet the target of 35%, which is the Mayor's fast track, which means that you wouldn't have to provide viability information. However, they do aspire to offering more than that if possible, so that is a minimum amount. Moving on to design, you'll see that this is a scheme that has the latest version of it has gone to the DRP. It's very unusually got a unanimous green verdict. Going through the issues on design, mass and heights. It is a 6-story building, largely with a massing of a 5-story building. It is a landmark building, marking a transport hub, which is the tram stop. It is larger than others in the immediate area, but there are examples of larger buildings on corners in the area, up to 5 stories, which is a similar overall height to this. The layout is sound in a courtyard configuration, which will it reduces the impact on the neighbour by not having a solid built-up wall next to that property to the south. In terms of the design and appearance, as I touched on briefly earlier, we've got a number of design features with the ribbon picking up on cues from the local area and a good variety in terms of materials and form to create a degree of interest. Moving on to other issues, urban greening factor. It's one of the few schemes that would meet the requirement of 0.4, which is positive. In terms of neighbouring amenity, overlooking would be to the fronts of neighbouring properties. Any overlooking to the neighbouring properties to the south is dealt with by privacy screens on some windows towards the southern part of the building. You'll see that there is an impact on daylight and sunlight. Some properties will experience a reduction that is largely due to the fairly open aspect that they enjoy at the moment. Ultimately, the residual values which are achieved are considered to be reasonable and acceptable. In terms of noise concerns, as a result of a number of students living there, this is controlled by a management plan. The site is staffed, so it's not students sort of left to their own devices, so to speak. The standard of accommodation meets the relevant requirements as well as inclusive design. In terms of transport, no parking is provided, which is appropriate in this very high public transport accessibility level. Cycle parking is provided well in excess of London Plan requirements. As I mentioned, we do have a condition to limit the length of vehicles servicing the site, and that's to allow for turning in Charles Road. The tram path would be improved, which is a planning benefit of the proposal, and the frontage, the additional public realm space, is also a benefit of the proposal. I'll move on in the mod sheet to this as well, but there has been a suggestion of incorporating a cycleway to the frontage. We have spoken to our colleagues in transport planning who feel that some sort of solution could be beneficial, and have asked us to look at whether it's possible to integrate this in. And again, the applicant has indicated that they're willing to look at this, obviously subject to the exact way it would work. And we had some concerns about where the cycle lane may join back onto the road network. But it looks like there might be a way of doing it which would work, even if it doesn't go across the tram path. So that's something we'd like to look at if it can be achieved. There is an outstanding issue in terms of transport, and that's not about the operational phase, but about the constructional phase of development. The building is largely a lot of prefabricated elements which would be brought onto site by a large vehicle. That reduces the build time quite significantly and the disruption to neighbouring properties, because a lot of it's built already. It does mean, though, that a large vehicle needs to access the site. We have got a concern from our transport planners about a articulated lorry reversing into Rutlish Road. So at the moment, we've recommended a condition that we take this away and look at alternative solutions for the construction phase. Whether that be smaller trucks, if that's feasible, whether that be more information about the possibility of reversing into Rutlish Road to satisfy our transport colleagues, or whether it be an entirely alternative solution to where the lorry would stop. But that is something that we feel can reasonably be dealt with under condition. In terms of sustainable design and construction, air source heat pumps are proposed, and then, as you saw on the roof, solar panels, and we will have conditions and a legal agreement to include the carbon offset contribution. Air quality acceptable, subject to condition. Flood risk and drainage. There's quite a lot of reduction in terms of runoff, and conditions are recommended on this, but it's positive. Biodiversity net gain has been demonstrated. As I briefly mentioned earlier, in terms of safety and security, there is a 24/7 manned reception desk and security, fob controlled access, and only that single access point. In addition, the user experience of the tram path would be greatly improved, the perception of safety improved, better visibility lines along there, so not quite so much of a kink in the path that allows for hiding spots. In terms of fire safety, it meets the relevant guidance. Taking you to the modification sheet, you'll see that the agent has provided some additional wording in terms of the daylight and sunlight assessment, a layman's summary to try and set out where the targets are not hit and what the justifications for those are. And it's a lot of rehearsing the arguments that we made under the previous application of a retained level in the mid-teens being reasonable. We have some additional climate change comments. You'll also see in the mod sheet that we have the model for the daylight and sunlight assessment. Now that's not in its final form. It's a sort of a line model, but it does give an indication of the surrounding bulk and the proposed bulk. Climate change officer has come back to confirm some conditions and the carbon offset amount. So you'll see that we have some amended conditions to take that into account. And then beyond that, the member queries. The recommendation is to grant subject to conditions and section 106 as per the report and the modification sheet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Tim, for that helpful and very detailed run through. So what I'd like to do is call on our resident speakers. So I've got John Towers and then David Simmons to speak in that order. So 3 minutes. John, if you'd start us off.
My name is John Towers. I live in 8 Rutlish Road. I'm a retired chartered structural and civil engineer. The building is 2 stories too high. It should be 4 stories only. I sent in a letter on the 27th with images to show this. The building is 3 times higher than the sheltered housing in Rutlish Road with vulnerable residents who will be affected. It's twice the height of buildings in Kingston Road opposite. The pavement is proposed at 3.9 meters, which is too narrow. I've also got images 27th of March, which show a better alignment with adjacent buildings and a better setting. The existing telephone exchange is referenced as a building of similar height in Kingston Road. It is set 8.6 meters back from the curb, which is twice as wide, which makes its height less obtrusive and more acceptable. We have the opportunity to add in a cycle lane to cross the Croydon tram line, which will be a benefit to residents, including families with children and new students. See my images of the 27th of March. Currently, the route for cyclists is very unsafe from Rutlish Road over the junction and into Kingswood Road due to the layout and the painted stop lines being too far back. I know this from my own experiences, as this is the worst bit of my local bike ride up to the Common. Merton Highways and TfL have stated that no reversing will be permitted from Kingston Road by articulated lorries at 16.48 meters long in the construction phase due to the significant disruption created, and it will be formally rejected by them. As a result, the number of vehicle movements and the duration of the construction period will be significantly increased from that stated in the application. This cannot be left to a condition to be dealt with later, as we know what the impact is now. There was and still is here a legacy of William Rutlish, John Innes, and his architects, Henry Quatermain and John Brocklesby, who created what we see around us, all of whom lived here, died here, and are all buried in the churchyard of St. Mary's Church in Merton Park. Their vision will be destroyed if this proposal is not amended. You have a responsibility to protect and enhance the character of the area, which is not a simple tick box exercise with the Mayor of London's London plan, mostly of which are only appropriate for inner city sites, which this is not. Reference has been made to the previous application of 2021, which must be invalid as this was not determined. Merton planning policies give a clear guidance about the criteria acceptable for development, including enhancing and making a positive contribution, giving due consideration to conservation areas, reducing the conflict between pedestrians, cyclists, and other transport modes, and perhaps most importantly, for designs to respect, reinforce, and enhance local character. In my opinion, this proposal does not do this, and issues have been
Thank you,
ignored
John.
by the planning officer.
Thank you very much. No, thank you. Sorry, it's just a balance of fairness. If I allow the applicant to go on longer than finish a sentence, you would. Cool. Well, perhaps David can speak on that point. David, 3 minutes.
My name is David Siemens. I'm resident of Rutlish Road and represent the views of many other locals in the area. It's important to note that we are not against the development on this site and would welcome student accommodation, but the height and scale of this proposal is well beyond what is reasonable. It pitches a 6-storey cliff base against existing 2-storey sheltered accommodation for disabled and vulnerable people. Some of these residents are housebound and the only sunlight they see is through their windows. This will not be the case if this proposal is granted. Even the planning officer acknowledges that daylight to some of these windows falls below acceptable standards, and there will be others that will fall just below limiting criteria, so their rooms will be darker. Therefore, I argue this development needs to be smaller in height by 2 stories. The proposed building is significantly out of keeping with historic buildings adjacent and opposite in both design and materials used. I'm shocked to discover that brick cladding is proposed on this project rather than traditional hand-laid bricks. This is not clear from the application. One of the things that attracts many residents to Old Merton Park is the historic buildings. I hope my son will have an appreciation for this as he gets older. This proposal, for what is effectively a high-rise block of flats, puts this at risk. Not only is this proposal out of keeping and unsuitable, the proposal itself and the planning officer's report is misleading. The applicant and the officer state this will provide new student accommodation as existing UAL stock is 45 minutes away. However, the applicant's own website states that this is actually 20 minutes away by bicycle and 35 minutes by public transport. The applicant, by their own admission, doesn't actually need this accommodation. It's a commercial choice that will swell their coffers in future years. And there is the crux of this matter. The college claim to be part of the community, but have not listened to or actioned one point made by existing members of that community during consultation. Furthermore, this proposal tramples on that community and only serves the applicant's own financially motivated purpose. It certainly does not appear positive in terms of educational benefits, even though the officer suggested this. So in summary, you cannot, with clear conscience, allow this proposal to go ahead. I trust that we do the right thing, turn down this proposal in its current form, and ask the applicant to resubmit. I will now read a representation for the Camping for Real Ale. CAMRA does not object to the development per se, but does object to the fact that a replacement pub is not included in the plan. We are not arguing that the current White Hart pub building should be retained, but that use as a pub should be included in the new development. On the matter of the loss of the pub, the officer's report relies on the viability report called the Statement of Case, submitted with the application to justify the loss of pub use on the site. These reports always argue non-viability case that the developer seeks. The fact that a previous pub business failed for various reasons does not mean that a pub business within a new development would not be viable. There are many viable pubs in SW19. A number of those are in Wimbledon Town Centre, and there is no reason why one in Merton Park should not be viable. Although those in the town centre are within 800 metres, they are still a fair walk away, and it is undeniable that a pub in the new White Hart development would have no competition in the immediate vicinity. It is within the gift of planning committee to deny change of use from a sui generis drinking establishment, and I urge you to do so. This would not derail the proposed development, as the plans already include retail space on the ground floor. There's no obvious reason why there should not be a replacement pub, which could perhaps be a cafe in the morning.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you very much. Royce, you did good sticking to time. Thank you, appreciate that. So we've got ward councillors now wishing to speak. Can I call John Braithwaite to start? 2 minutes.
Oh, yes. As an Abbey Ward councillor, I'd like to speak on behalf of the local residents. While generally supportive of having student accommodation here, the residents are very concerned about the height and mass of the building. This is partly due to the fact the building rises directly from the pavement and not set back, unlike other buildings in Rutlish Road. So, which is a bit misleading from some of the CGI images that have been shown. There have been many submissions to this effect from residents. I've had a lot of contact with them to this effect, and these issues seem to be dismissed by the planning officers. It'd be appreciated by local residents if the building could be reduced by 1 floor at least or set back further from Rutlish Road. The government's published National Design Guide specifies that any building should take the following into consideration: composition of street scenes, individual buildings and their elements, the height, scale, massing and relationships between buildings, views, vistas and landmarks. Although the architects have been good in taking some local features into their design, I believe that the above elements of the guidance have not been taken into consideration. One other recommendations in the design guide refers to accessibility and ease of movement. And I will like to second what John Towers said about bike access and the cycle lane. The junction of Kingston Road, Rutlish Road and the tram tracks is one of the most dangerous in the area, especially going westbound as the road narrows considerably after the junction with Rutlish Road. And it's hard for cyclists to reach the safer zone in front of the traffic. And even when they're there, the traffic still tries to get past them when they go. So the cycle lane would be much appreciated. So also on one of the images, there are trees shown on Rutlish Road. It's not part of the design, I believe, and it would also help mitigate the rise from vertical of that particular building.
Thank you very much, John. I'd like to now call Mike Brunt to speak on this as well.
Thank you, Chair. We've had strong arguments already placed about the size of the building, and I know that Vertex House, which is the one you referred to on the corner of Palmerston Road, is 5 stories. And I would like to emphasise and reinforce the points that have been made about the bulk of the building. I'll cut out 1 or 2 things because I don't want to reiterate, and I want to push on with some emphasising other points. The stepping back from the pavement or the curbside will be better. I think if there was more, it was further back from the curb in Rutlish Road and on Kingston Road, that would actually reduce the impact of the side of the building. And already we've heard how much further back the telephone exchange is from the roadside. I'm not suggesting that much, but more would be better. I'm really encouraged by the positive responses to the suggestion of a cycle track, and I thank John in particular for the conversation we had on site talking about that, because if it was just starting at the start of the corner of Rutlish Road and ran right across, and the traffic lights across the tram line was a dual pedestrian cycle traffic light, and if it could possibly go then as far as the junction with Dorset Road, then cyclists will be able to turn left on Dorset Road and then filter through quieter residential roads as they cycle further on, because Kingston Road is not a good place to cycle, I know from experience. The construction phase, the Dean, I understand, has suggested that there could be a liaison group with residents through that stage, and I would like to see if the committee agrees the building that be built in. But I'd like to take it further and suggest that because this is a student resident accommodation, that there should be a community liaison group established as part of the condition going forward. So it's not just ending at the end of the construction, that there's always an opportunity for residents and the college or the university and students to meet and discuss some of those ongoing issues that may happen. I think everything else that I was going to say have been mentioned by other people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Good addition to that. I'd like to now ask the applicants to speak. I've got Jane and Justin. I think Jane's speaking first. Brilliant.
Good evening, councillors. I'm Jane Knowles and I'm Dean of Performance at Wimbledon College of Arts, which is part of University of the Arts London. Wimbledon College of Arts has been based in the local area for over 100 years. We started out as a technical institution teaching drawing in Gladstone Road, close to Merton Park Tram. As the college became more successful in 1940, we moved to larger premises on our current site in Merton Hall Road. So this area has been our home for a long time, and we are very proud of our South London roots and our contribution to the educational offer in this part of London. Wimbledon College of Arts is dedicated to the study of stage and screen performance, and we train students to become innovative performers and experimental designers. Our graduates are known internationally for their creativity, technical accomplishment, and professionalism. University of Arts London is ranked #2 in the world for art and design education, and our costume course is ranked in the top 10 of courses globally to study costume. Our reputation for excellent education extends globally as well as locally. The nature of the courses means our students spend much of their week on site, being taught and working independently in the performance studios and the design workshops. For example, rehearsals that they cannot do at home, or making large props and costumes that are difficult to transport to and from college. For many of our students, they have a long commute to campus. The university halls are limited in number and are spread across London. Currently, the nearest hall of residence to the college is in Streatham. As you will be aware, there is a crisis in the provision of good quality, affordable accommodation across London, and our students are not exempt from this. The university is committed to encouraging students from less affluent backgrounds into higher education, and the provision of affordable accommodation is a key factor in achieving this. The college is proud to call this wonderful pocket of South London our home. We would like the same for our students, the opportunity to call Wimbledon home through access to high quality, well-managed, affordable accommodation that is close. A new hall of residence at 144 Kingston Road will give students that, and it will make a real difference to the experience of our students, strengthening their connection to Wimbledon and enhancing their sense of place. This proposal of 271 rooms would enable all first-year students to be offered accommodation close to the college. If planning permission is granted, following a 2-year construction period, our students would benefit from the 2025-26 academic year. We hope that they can enrich the local area with their talent, energy, and creativity, and support the local economy. Thank you for your time this evening and for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. And now we move on to Justin.
Hello, councillors. I'm Justin Elcombe of Hollybrook, and we're working with Wimbledon College of Arts to help them deliver this project. In fact, a little bit of background, we've worked with UAL up in Southwark, we're a South London firm, delivered a couple of schemes for them, and they asked us some years ago to look for a site for accommodation for Wimbledon College of Arts, and it's taken the best part of 5 years really to identify this site and secure it, and we've been working over the last couple of years to deliver this project. You heard from Jane the desperate need for accommodation for Wimbledon College of Arts students, and I wanted just to say a few words about the wider benefits that the scheme will bring to the public and local people. In terms of the design, it is highly sustainable and energy efficient, and it really has evolved through really close working and collaborative working with your officers, with your design panel, and mention has been made of the fact that we got a resounding seal of approval from your external design panel. And then from that position, working with local councillors, local residents, and local interest groups. So we've had a really good and positive consultation process. And just to reiterate, we want to carry on that if we do get recommendation for approval tonight, to take that through and set up a construction residents working group, so that we work very closely with the residents through the construction phase to make sure that we minimize any downsides of construction. Of course, there'll always be some disturbance, but hopefully maximize the upsides. And just on that, we will be providing apprenticeship training, we will be providing construction jobs, we will reach out to local schools and work with them about identifying jobs in construction and real estate, and showing and sharing how a scheme comes together. More specifically in terms of benefits for local people, and picking up the point of setting the building back, it's worth noting that we will be more than doubling the width of the pavement on Kingston Road. People who know that piece of stretch will know it's very tight. The average width of that road increases from 1.7 to 4.5, so more than doubling. Similarly, on the tram line, we'll be widening that footpath and setting the building back from an average of 2 meters up to 4 meters. And likewise on Rutledge Road, the footpath there increasing from 2 to 3 meters. So we've really taken that on board. and also the building steps down to just 4 stories there. So other than the improvements in Kingston Road, there's new trees and landscaping, improved access to the tram stop, and a new independent convenience store and cafe on the corner of Kingston Road and Rutlish Road. So in summary, this is a unique opportunity. It's been many years to get to this point, very important milestone. So we're all very pleased to be here. It's a very high quality design scheme. It is highly sustainable and highly energy efficient. It's an exemplar design that has evolved through a process of significant consultation. We will continue to consult with residents and set up a construction residents working group. The scheme provides a number of wider benefits to the local community.
Thank you very much. So just for those Coffin residents, you were hearing from the applicant that they were committing to setting up a panel for your benefit. So I allowed them to speak for that point. Thank you very much. So I'd like to ask the cabinet member to speak. Please, Stephen Unbridges.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak again, Chair. As you know, Merton Council have proudly installed segregated cycle tracks in recent years at the following locations: Holborn Way, Mitcham, London Road, Mitcham, Plough Lane. A step cycle track is currently under construction at Merton High Street. There's also plans to remove the existing cycle lane defenders on Hayden's Road, Bridge, and a step cycle track is also proposed to be installed on Streatham Road between Figs Marsh and the borough boundary as part of a wider corridor scheme. So we come to the White Hart Pub application tonight. TfL say this at para 7424, page 189. The widening of Kingston Road pavement is a benefit of the proposal, particularly given the current narrow pavement width. TfL also say this at paras 5322, page 175. TfL strongly supports the proposal to improve footway width on Kingston Road in line with London Plan Policy T2 Healthy Streets and D8 Public Realm. As Councillor Brunt has added, he's welcomed the widening of the pavement on Kingston Road. And finally, from me, Chair, I've looked at the plans myself, and the new Kingston Road pavement is wide enough for shared use space or a segregated cycling facility to allow cyclists to bypass the traffic on the approach to the tram line. Such a measure would be very beneficial to cyclists, and recommend that we allow for such a provision. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's good to hear that that is indeed possible, and your officers consider that as well. So I'd like to ask Tim to respond to some of those points, and perhaps any definitions that are quite helpful just to spell out as well.
Thank you, Chair. If there's any specific points you'd like me to come back on, which I don't, please do flag this up. There was a reference to the previous application in the public speaking. It's correct that previous application was not determined, so no council decision was made on that. It did get to a point where it was largely supported by officers, but that is not a formal council decision. In terms of setbacks from the road, that is a matter of visual judgment to be taken into the balance. As I said, the suggestion of a cycle lane to the frontage has been set out. There is support for that from our transport colleagues, and the applicant has also indicated a willingness to accept subject to how it would work. So officers are happy to take that forward and look at the possibilities of facilitating that. And that's, unless there's anything else you'd like to come back on, Chair, that's all for now. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Okay, so members, over to you. So I'm gonna try this again in sense of going through planning considerations on 181. So it'd be really good to just ask for any questions related to the principles of development. So we've heard some of the issues already teased out already about public house and employment land, and the 5-year land supply as well, already talked about. Any questions on that particular area? No? Okay. Affordable housing. Does anyone want to speak to that point? So we've got one question. I've got a question. Got Dan.
I just wanted to check whether the section 106 agreement in 7.33 has been agreed so that this, if this gets passed, the rents for the places here will be similar across the entire portfolio as has been agreed.
Sorry, can you just clarify then when you say similar? Sorry.
So that this place doesn't become the most expensive student accommodation amongst the portfolio, it is proposed that the condition is applied so that the rents cannot, for these rooms here, will be at the same level or below as to the other rooms in the university's portfolio. Has that been agreed and accepted by the applicant? Okay,
fantastic. So I've got one question on how the rents are benchmarked, Tim, and then my question is about just how the affordable units are just spread across the development, and just understanding the different, if there's any difference in design at all.
Thank you, Chair. There's no difference in design, so they wouldn't be certain units which are the affordable units, but it would be an overall provision within the building. I'm afraid I can't give you the exact chapter and verse on how the rents will be benchmarked, but it is something that we're aware of. Not that we suspect this is the intention by any means, but we understand the argument that, you know, if you're offering some at a lower rent than the others, you could simply jack up the rent for the others, but there will be measures and safeguards within the section 106 to ensure that it is carried out in a way that's recognized in the industry that we can reasonably control. Thank you, Chair.
That's good to hear. Okay. Affordable housing. So next bit is design and character and appearance. Bearing in mind, we've got the highest standard from the DRP. Are there any questions or queries on this? Susie, anyone else? Susie.
Only one, really. I absolutely get the DRP has given it a green flag. My concern is looking at it, can I just make sure I've got this right? The 6-story element is basically opposite the junction with Hartfield Road and the old, what's now I think it's a bathroom shop, the old Finch & Co. And the 4-story element is on the edge of Rutlish Road. So the lowest part is next to Rutlish Road.
Yes, I mean, it staggers down. So towards the adjoining properties on Rutlish Road will be the lowest point. But at the very front of Rutlish Road, it would still be higher and staggering down. So at the rear part of the south, it would be at that 4-story level.
Mike.
Looking at it from Kingston Road.
Is it better to just pull up a visual?
Sorry?
Yeah. Is it better to pull up a visual?
A visual would help, yes.
Yep.
So that's from tram. Can we see it from Kingston Road?
Yes, bear with me. I'm just having again some difficulty, the computer responding.
While Tim brings it up, can I just invite the applicant to speak to that point, because you've obviously got closer detail?
There we go. Chair, thank you. Steve Marshall, I'm the architect, along with my colleagues of the project. Just to say generally, the way that the building sits on this very important site has been a prime concern to us through the whole process. And the site, particularly on the northeast corner where it's tallest, marks that very important junction of Kingston Road, the tram, and the road coming down from the north, from, if you like, the middle of Wimbledon. So it's a very interesting piece of urban design. And at that particular point, what we're actually doing is we're taking, generally the top floor of the building is always pushed back. And as we've also heard, one really important thing to bear in mind is that student housing is considerably lower than traditional residential. Student housing floor to floor, roughly 2.7
Can I just
something.
Can I just
Yeah.
pause you for a second? It would be helpful to fast forward to the point about the slope. I would love to hear a lot more geeky detail. Trust me, I am that type of person. But can we just understand the point that the councillor Hicks raised? So if you want to reiterate your question, and then we.
I simply wanted to understand what the impact will be on Rutlish Road, and perhaps one way of doing, because people keep saying that this is much lower than it would be if it were normal housing, would be to say how tall the building which abuts Rutlish Road will be at the front and at the back, and that probably answers the question.
The drawing that you were looking at is the section along Rutledge Road. So it's highest, obviously, at Kingston Road. And it steps down to be in scale with the houses on kind of Rutledge Road. So you can kind of see what's happening there.
If it helps members, Kingston Road here with the higher part of the building, this is effectively a view from Rutlish Road, and then the existing flatted block here next to the development site, so to the south. The highest point of the building being the corner on the tram line in Kingston Road. Thank you, Chair.
I think I now understand. I had misunderstood this. So that 6-story block at the end is facing the 2-story accommodation on the other side of the road. I apologize, I hadn't understood. So it steps down, but at the top of Rutlish Road, sort of where it joins Kingston Road, you have the full impact of the height facing the residential accommodation.
Well, yes, that's the case. So the buildings at the frontage here, and this is the view from Rutlish Road, would be taller. And if I show you that on a plan. So you can see the various staggered heights of the building in these sections here. So
Cool.
yes, you can see the properties on the other side. So this section here would be the highest element. Then onto the side of the dwelling here and the frontage here.
But if we keep that plan up, I think
bit of
to
Rutlish
your
Road,
point,
yeah.
as you move towards the tracks, obviously it goes higher as well. So you've got the 2 different planes of dimension in terms of the height. Okay, so anything else on height design? No. All right. Urban greening factor and trees. I've got a question, but I don't know if anyone else has. Susie?
Just in terms of trees, I think trees are being replaced. And if trees are being replaced, there was a lovely question from the Wimbledon Society on the other application about something called a Luckhurst definition, which means that the trees which are planted are as mature as the trees which go. Is that possible?
That was going to be my question. So yeah, I think we've previously conditioned that when that basically you don't replace with saplings. So that was just the understanding there. Maybe we can just take that into comments then. Okay. Anything else on greening? Sheriam? No. All right. Impact on neighbourhood amenity. Anything on that, Sheriam?
Just to raise Councillor Brunt's point about establishing a resident group in perpetuity. I think that'd be a great idea. As someone who used to work in student accommodation, live in student accommodation, we had student accommodation boards with students and local residents. So maybe that would be helpful if this were approved.
Cool. We'll get Martin and then Susie. Martin.
I think it's probably the best one obviously been in terms of the construction management aspect of it, obviously given the restrictions, in terms of Rutlish Road, in terms of its constructions. I don't obviously know if cranes will be involved in terms of the construction of this operation. Obviously, Rutlish Road is a very narrow road. What will the impact be, obviously, if there is restrictions on Rutlish Road in terms of Kingston Road, given obviously this is a main part of the strategic road network? It would be helpful, obviously, to have a bit more information about how those issues will be addressed, given the concerns which have been raised on Rutlish during that construction phase.
And Susie?
I'm absolutely with councillor Welton on this. You have a tiny little road, a cul-de-sac, which is Rutlish Road, and then you have Kingston Road in front of it. And my understanding is that TfL has said that reversing into and out of Kingston Road is wholly unacceptable and there has to be some sort of plan. And I absolutely struggle to see how they can do this, so how they can bring in modular units nearly 70 on lorries, nearly 17 meters long, and cranes. I know this junction really, really well, and I just don't see how it's going to be done. So I wondered whether we could, I have now, my screen keeps blacking out, so I haven't got the condition that TfL suggested to one of the residents, but a condition that this can't be built until they have a plan, which means that it is going to actually be possible, given the extreme limits of the site.
Cool. So I think let's unpack that. I think there are two options there. One was obviously the modularization, the modular build, and then obviously there's general construction as you would build anything. So let's bear that in mind. So we've got two questions ultimately. One was about the in perpetuity setting up a residence engagement board, and the second ultimately was about how this will be built from a modular perspective. Tim and John, on the first, is that sounds within keeping to propose such a scheme, and then I'll just bring the applicant in on both those points as well, if that would work.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So we do have this issue of reversing in from Kingston Road. It's actually the Council Highway Authority and Transport Planner who've raised concern with this, rather than TfL. The way we'd look to deal with this is a condition to work through it, which will be a pre-commencement condition, so that there would be no development allowed until that is agreed. What the actual outcome of that is, I don't know at the moment. As I indicated earlier, it will either be more information to demonstrate that reversing in could be made acceptable, subject to more mitigation measures, banksman, and whatever else might be needed, restriction on timings. There might be a possibility that slightly smaller vehicles that will be able to reverse in could use it. I don't know if that's possible. Or there may have to be looking at it in a different way entirely. Generally speaking, in planning, we are required to limit the impact of construction as far as reasonably possible. But it is not an area where we can reasonably refuse permission if we can put mitigation in place. But certainly we do, we are looking to find a solution and to have that controlled by condition. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, if it reassures members at all, I had a conversation with the head of Future Merton today, who was satisfied that there is a way through this via a condition. So there is no objection to a condition from his point of view, and that was his technical advice. So one way or another, we will find a way through it, and there are those options that Tim has outlined, but it wouldn't necessarily stop the development in advance.
Fantastic. Can I just put that then to the applicants about such a condition, but also be keen to understand your plan A, how do you see that working? I'm again big fan of modularization because of the speed of it, but how do you see it practically in this site? And two, what's your plan B if that's not possible? Bearing in mind that obviously has a bottom line price because you want to get this built ASAP.
Thank you, Chair. Just to start, yeah, we're very happy to work with such a condition, and we will, as the scheme develops, work through the various construction phases. Just to stay, obviously, at the early part of the project, we'll probably be able to turn vehicles on the site because we won't have built across all of it. So there will be ability to do some of that. And then there are other potential solutions with craneage, and the type of cab that you use will give us more flexibility. And it may be that we use slightly shorter lorries. But just to reassure you that we have built on equally tight sites in London. So we're confident we can find that detail that will keep everyone happy. And dare I say it, with the construction residents association group, we can always plan works to make sure we minimize disruption to residents and keep them informed when particularly large pieces of kit have to come to site. So I think working together, we can find a good way forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Susie, last bit on this, and Tom.
Last one, I'll make it two issues in one question. The first is, I know this little stretch of road as well. It is very dangerous on a bike. And if there's anything we can do to ensure that a cycle lane is added to the scheme, I would very much endorse that. And the second one, something which has come up again and again and again from residents in emails, is the impact on parking. There is no parking, right? Well, there is at the moment because there's the area which is.
I think let's pause you there because it's spoilers, because the transport section.
I'll be very short. The question is, at the beginning and end of term, you're going to have 271 parents picking up and dropping off their lovely children with their possessions. And I just don't see any way that's going to work on this site. I just wondered what plans there were to make that possible.
Let's pause that a second and move that into transport. But that's a really good technical detail. It is very detailed. Tom, anything on this section?
Just on the construction points, share all the concerns that have been expressed by others. Has there been any assessment in terms of, obviously it's a very tight site and appreciate things do get built in similar sites. Has there been any assessment of the impacts on the tram crossing? Because I mean, anyone that has the misfortune of driving there, but 12 times an hour that there's trams coming through, it's already kind of backed up, and yeah, the prospect of then adding construction traffic that may or may not be able to reverse out of certain places getting in the mix of that. I appreciate that the trams are a good selling point for the development, but it seems adding that into the mix is a bit more of a complication as well that I don't think's been addressed by anyone else up to now.
Thank you. I think unless Tim, you've got a burning desire to jump in and may put that to the applicant of how they would achieve that while minimise the disruption on the tram network.
Yes, Chair, that would be useful. I mean, all I can really come back on that point is to say that we've not had objections from TfL, the Highway Authority, or Transport Planning on that, but I do appreciate your point.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, we've had a pre-app meeting and discussion with TfL, and they don't have any objection to the construction or method of construction. We, needless to say, we won't be stopping on Kingston Road to unload and offload, so we will be able to keep that road running smoothly.
Okay, all right. Well, I think it's one of these things that if it is approved, we'll see it in the delivery. Okay, so next thing, standard of accommodation. Anyone any questions on this? The only query I had from myself consulting the plans, there appeared to be, again, casting my memory back from living in student dorms, a lot of door clash, so doors going on doors, and I didn't know what the design considerations there were about potentially having sliding doors where appropriate, potentially in the bathroom to avoid that, or how that would work or not work, or is this an issue that you've not really considered or considered and thought it is a minimal issue?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, no, we do design to avoid that door clash, so the bathroom door move is goes in, as it were, as opposed to coming out. So once you're in your room, your front door is closed, you then access the bathroom. So yeah, it has been looked at carefully, and it's all quite tried and tested solution. No problem. Thank you.
Super. Okay. Anyone else on the standard? No. All right. So inclusive design and accessibility. Anyone for a question on that? No. Transport. So back to Susie's question. Probably the practicalities then, and this may be one for more detail later on. But how do you see 250 odd parents coming and picking up your kids?
So the university, we schedule the students so that there's a time slot that they have for dropping off, and then the parents, if it was parents dropping them off, they would need to move their car somewhere else. There won't be anywhere to stop. It is just unloading. And for our international students, the university offers a collect and drop off service through Addison Lee from the airport directly to the halls. So it would just again be a drop off.
Brilliant. Okay. Good for international students. Anyone else for anything else on transport? Tom and Ed.
Thanks, Tom. It was just a question, what about those students with their own cars? You've only got to go to some of the schools. It's true, there are some parents that will give their children cars. It's a fact.
All right, cars, parents, Tom?
It was more or less the same question, actually. I was wondering, interested to hear from the developer, given their sort of experience of obviously having students elsewhere, how they can enforce themselves kind of restrictions on making sure students don't bring cars.
Just killjoys, the students have it tough enough. All right, so query. Anyone else, any third question on transport? No? All right, Michael, you go for it. You got a council.
Yeah, I'll take up Councillor Manley's point. If we are having students with cars, then there should be some EV points.
Yeah, fair enough. So it'd be great to just understand, I think, because I believe in reading from the application, there are, you've got legal means in terms of enforcing that students don't bring cars on site. And it'd be good obviously to hear from Tim as well, any sort of conditions that would be applied.
Sure, yes, I wish I had a parent who would buy me a car. The tenancy prohibits students from owning a car while they're in their halls, having a car with them whilst they're in London in their halls. And the university is really, really strict about this. And if a student breaks their contract, then they will be asked to leave.
Okay, that's plain and enough. Okay. Tim, do you have anything to add on that in terms of the conditionality that has been enforced?
No, I've nothing further to add on that. The intention is that it's written into the lease. It is possible that we could work this into a legal agreement or condition, so we have an extra layer of control also.
Chair, just to add to that, yes, we could request copies of those tenancy agreements to, so, it's on the public record that they are in place, and I think that would be sufficient.
I think that's a fair compromise, colleagues. Okay, we'll take that into comments. Susie, and then we'll move on to the next.
Sorry, this was actually a last question. Deliveries and servicing. I've had an awful lot of emails from residents who are very worried about the prospect of 272 Uber drivers arriving. And it is a real issue because this is a tiny little street and a main road and nothing. So I just wondered whether there was anything we could do to make that more bearable for the residents, because it is going to happen.
I think that's a fair question. Maybe the first question for this residents panel. Tim, do you have a view on the load and unload and how that is actually going to be sorted out for the scheme in general?
Yes, if I take you to again the layout plans, what two accesses into the site would be removed, which creates more curbside space. So the two parking spaces are relocated. It does leave a large swathe of double yellows, which can be used for loading and unloading. So larger vehicles up to 8 meters, which can turn in Charles Road, could then load and unload here, and that could also be used for students on the booking appointment system. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Can I just put that to the applicant as well? I mean, in designing this, have you had any thought about how you would accommodate servicing further?
Chair, I'll take this one. David Pearce from Canapor Associates. So we're the transport consultants. So we've fully reviewed this from a delivery and servicing management perspective, and we're looking to deliver some Sheffield stands at the front of the development on Kingston Road as part of our development. So you'll find your delivery and Uber Eats would be by bicycle. So it's trying to keep them on the strategic road network rather than going down Rutlish Road. So we have worked on a few student accommodations, and yes, Uber Eats is a big issue. So it's trying to keep those away from residential streets and on the key networks.
Okay, thank you very much. That's quite helpful. All right, Sherry Ann.
Sorry, can we just pick up Councillor Brunt's earlier suggestion about a resident group, because I feel like there wasn't a conclusion to that earlier.
I thought we've got agreement from the applicant and we've taken it into comments to formalise it as a condition. But it's a good point. And again, it sounds like it's a first item for such a residents group. Okay, if there's nothing else on transport, sustainable design and construction, anything on that? So I note, okay, all right. So air quality and potential contaminated land. Questions? No. Flood risk, drainage? Come on, Susie, you're bound to have a question on this. All right. Biodiversity, you're waiting for the hedgehogs. Okay, go for it.
Hedgehogs and swifts and bats, please. It's a big building next to a green area.
So we do have Swift bricks already. I did note the representations from the Swift Society who wanted, I think, double the amount. I think 20, or basically they wanted 40 or so.
Great.
But I think 20 sounded reasonable. And you mentioned hedgehogs. I think there's also an insect station already installed as well.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on ecology? Okay. And secure by design considerations, anything at all, given this is student accommodation and some vulnerable residents as well? No. Secure by design. Anything? No. All right. And fire safety. Anything further? No. AOB. Any other issues we've not talked about? Anyone talk about on this? Any questions? No. Okay. All right. So we'll do comments to avoid confusion as last time. We'll do comments first and then move on to the conditions, because you may raise, additional conditions in comments. So who wants to speak on this and their view? All right. Susie, Ed, Martin.
As with the other one, this is one I very, very strongly want to approve. And on this occasion, despite very grave reservations about the impact on vulnerable people in Rutlish Road, and I'm disappointed to see the size of the building facing the top of Rutlish Road. And I am extremely concerned about the impact of the construction process, but I'm hoping that is going to be conditioned and managed. And if it doesn't, this simply won't happen. So that's an interesting one, but it's not a reason to say no to this, because it can either it will be dealt with or it will be impossible. So I'm very impressed by the fact that this got a green flag from the DRP, and an awful lot of work has been done to make this acceptable and positive in lots and lots of ways. So although it is going to impact on some residents in ways which I would really rather it didn't, it's a site which desperately needs to be developed, and it's a very positive thing. So I'm afraid I'm going to vote for it, despite considerable reservations.
Okay. Ed and Martin.
Thank you, Chair. The site does need developing. I'm pleased that the DRP gave it a green light. I think there's just a little bit too much on there. If I'm honest, I'd like to see it down a little bit. I'm not sure I would want quite such a large development at the end of my road. I am concerned about the vulnerable people opposite. As Councillor Hicks has said, the accessibility is a concern, and if they can't get around it, it won't happen. But yes, I think it's just a little bit too big for the site for me.
Okay, Martin.
Thank you. On this development, this is something I very much welcome in terms of Wimbledon. It's bringing in much needed student accommodation, something that Wimbledon lacks. It also has great economic value and impact for the surrounding areas, given that there is 271 rooms here. That's 271 students. It's a considerable boost. I'm sure it will obviously help the licensing trade as well within Wimbledon. The other thing as well, I don't have a problem with the height. I think the height is acceptable. I also note as well that this does adhere to high design standards. It's very rare for a development to get a green light from the design review panel. There's usually more caveats attached. So it's for that reason I will be obviously supporting it. I do note the points that Councillor Hicks raised in terms of construction management statement. I do think those issues do need to be dealt with by way of a condition, but I will be supporting this application, and it's an excellent application in my own view. Thank you.
Thank you. Second round of comments, Michael and Sherry Ann and Jill.
Thank you, Chair. Despite some reservations over the actual building of the development, I must say, considering the post-COVID considerable cuts to the arts, particularly for those from working class backgrounds, I'm very pleased to see this development here in our borough, and I will be supporting it this evening.
Sherry Ann.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to say that I really love to see that it's BREEAM excellent, affordable rates of quality accommodation for students, which is an absolute struggle. And it also helps relieve pressure on the local markets as well, so local landlords as well, freeing up more accommodation for residents, not just students. It's bringing lots of footfall for the local economy. It's got a green light from the DRP. I know I'm repeating, but that is really rare. Lots of cycle spaces, and I do quite like the look of the design. So I am minded to approve this application.
Thank you. Jill.
I have to give you a bit of history here. Take me 2 seconds. So in 1979, I was in the very privileged position to have my tuition paid for in order for me to be able to come to London and study as a student. Didn't have a car, couldn't drive, relied on public transport, which was also paid for. The only thing I had to pay for was accommodation on a very limited grant. And I see that there has been little change since 1979 to the present day in terms of standard of affordable accommodation for students. I am absolutely delighted that we are hopefully going to have a provision to enable not only students, but students of the arts who frankly get a pretty rough lot in life, as us older artists do in our 60s. So whether it goes ahead, dependent on the other issues, who knows? But I hope it does. And thank you for being so careful in your design.
Thank you. Tom.
Probably a combination of Councillor Hicks, Councillor Foley's comments from me. Agree with everything they said, and some comments from others. I mean, I think I'd sort of look at the site and look at the plans, and I'm still am not convinced it's workable. Notwithstanding the helpful comments from the applicant around sort of staggering drop-offs and that kind of thing. I mean, I think the height may be open to interpretation, appreciate what's been said by the design review panel, but actually I think there's a secondary issue to that, which is actually just the sheer number of students on the site. I think if it were fewer, I appreciate that puts the college university in a difficult position about where they house their students, but I think, yeah, it might look more workable if it was smaller, but probably more because of the numbers of students than necessarily the size of the building. As I say, I just look at the plans, look at the site that's there, and just think, yeah, the prospect of both in the construction phase and actually once built, trying to move that many people around that site and the sort of, yeah, the knock-on effects from them being there as well, notwithstanding the fact that actually, you know, as has been said, the applicants have spoken very well in lots of ways. It's a very good application, and yes, something should absolutely be built on that site. So hopefully, assuming it's not approved, they may be back with a smaller application that I'd probably be pleased to support.
Thank you very much. Okay, colleagues. So my understanding, I noted down 2 potential conditions during all that. So so it was. First is obviously we want to condition to see those tenants' letters or a copy of, and some assurance around that everyone is signed up to not owning a car in the area. I think there was one potential exemption we talked about previously about disabled residents, but I didn't know if that was an area that colleagues were particularly worried about so to mirror current no car restriction policies, which is that disabled students would have a car. I don't know if that would be a particular issue for the applicant, if that were to be the case.
I mean, it can be on applicant need. I mean, most disabled students attending the university don't have a car, but if there could be some flexibility, if they have a specific disability that requires personal transport, that would be helpful to have.
Yeah, I think let's be pragmatic. Yeah. So the condition is ultimately pragmatic. Majority of students won't have cars. If an individual is disabled with such a need that they do have mobility support, then of course they can get a car, but notwithstanding the proximity of this to your main site. Yeah. So it leaves the door open that if the possibility is there, that can be supported. Is that agreed by colleagues? Super. And there was another condition about obviously we talked before about the unique way this is going to be built, and that was another condition that officers were recommending, that they want to confirm that they can access the site in the sense of the drop off and pick up of the various builds and rooms that are going to be modularized and transported on site. So that was recommended by Tim to include. Is that agreed? Agreed. Cool. Has anyone noted anything that I've missed, Simon?
We haven't missed it because I haven't said it yet, but we discussed on the previous application the Saturday working and a commitment from the developers not to have heavy development and heavy plant on Saturday. And I wonder if these applicants would agree to the same condition.
I think that's a fair question. How would that impact your construction schedule? And is it possible no heavy plant on say a Saturday? Bearing in mind construction times on Saturday are normally, top of my head, I think it was 8 till 1 anyway.
I think that would be fine. I mean, we may need, as I say, occasional exceptions for when only certain operations can take place, but broadly speaking, yes, that's fine. Yeah, so no noisy operations on a Saturday. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine with. So the condition we're saying is no heavy machinery on Saturday, but if there is a need, then you need to apply for an exemption, and that goes to officers, and of course residents will be informed as needed and engaged. Right? Everyone agree with that? Oh, sorry, John, do you want to come in?
Well, just to elaborate on that as well, Chair, we did mention about the possibility of a construction residents group, and even beyond that, a community residents group for regular liaison. So they sort of link the two conditions together.
Absolutely. So thank you for that. And finally, we did talk about Mike's excellent suggestion about having not only a group established for the build, but actually keep them on afterwards, because particularly the drop off and pick off is going to be an interesting time for the local community. And I'm seeing nods from the applicants, which is good. So can I get nods from colleagues that we can implement that too? Thank you very much. So we've got that condition also. Okay. Final one from Susie.
Very last one. I'm not certain whether in all of this we've managed in any way to make it more likely that a cycle lane will actually be built. This is a very dangerous stretch of road, and if you have 270 additional cyclists on it, potential for disaster is huge. So the cycle lane that we have been talking about would be a very, very good thing. I just don't know whether we have this evening found a way of making sure that's going to happen.
That's fair enough. So we did. So my understanding is we've confirmed that behind the scenes, officers, cabinet members is happy with it. There is support locally, but we've not firmed it up, so to speak, in a formal condition. So what I would, 1 second, we just consult. Tim's just going to check the mod sheet. I believe we actually did address this secondly.
Chair, we thought back to a previous committee decision around, you know, the provision of infrastructure that wasn't guaranteed when we considered a Clarion scheme at Station Road, and we decided to request best endeavours and updates from the applicant in a legal agreement to try and secure that. And I would suggest the same approach again for the provision of this cycle lane.
I would support that, given the moving parts in it, and everyone agree with that. So it's not a condition, but it is in the legal agreement. Fantastic. All right. So seems we are wrapping up on this one. Excellent. So with all that in mind, with the question on the order paper and with the conditions we've just discussed, can I have all those voting against the scheme?
2, Chair.
Those not voting?
None, Chair.
Those voting for?
8, Chair.
It is carried. Thank you very much. Thank you for everyone who came tonight to speak to us, and thank you to the consultation as well. Yeah. Thank you. Look, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate your passion on this issue. Okay. Thank you. So we're now going to turn our attention to our last application. So it's a TPO application. And I would like to ask officers to present the item. So we need, in order, this TPO has come in and we need to take this item. So if I can beg the committee's indulgence, and we'll take it.
Can you just get that?
So colleagues, just want to thank you first for all your energies tonight, and also indulge me in just a little experiment. I do appreciate the late hour, and we do need to just take this TPO. John will talk briefly, and then we will vote on the matter. If you've got any questions, of course, do raise that as well. You know, I expect Ed to probably raise several questions because he's been troublesome tonight.
No, I think it does seem very straightforward, Chair. So we've served a tree preservation order on an oak tree at 12 Thurston Avenue in Morden. The reason being is this tree used to be part of the Cherry Wood woodland. Jade, could you just go to the location plan, please? Yeah, it's in the agenda packs as page 251, and it's on the screen now. So you'll see that the oak tree is positioned at the back of the site, the very rear of the residential property, a good distance away from the main dwelling. It's actually behind an outbuilding. It overhangs that. Most of Cherrywood is owned by the council, so we don't need to TPO most of the trees that were originally involved in this woodland. But we have had a tree disappear in a fairly nearby property recently that used to belong to Cherrywood, and we wanted to protect this with a preservation order. Jade, can we just have a quick look at the photographs, please? We think it's, there you go, that's from the path at the back. We think this is a tree worthy of protection in its own right. It's a mature tree. Just looking at that photo. yeah, that's just a close up of it. And then I think this is what really convinced us. There are public vantage views of the tree as well. You can see it clearly there between 12 and 14 Thirlstone Avenue. So it has a public benefit as well. And last photo, please, Jen. Yeah, and even there, it's the tree leaning in the most. So whichever angle you look at it from, it has some presence. It's mature. It's in good condition. We have had one objection that I want members to make members aware of. That's on page 248. It is from the resident of the property within which the tree is situated. The resident's concerned that the tree has dead branches. Well, actually, they can be removed irrespective of the TPO. Dead wood is allowed outside of the order. That can be removed. There's talk about difficulties in managing the tree and there being a financial burden. We don't agree. We can grant a 2-year tree works consent for up to 2 years. It can be renewed at any time. It's free to apply. We just don't think it's that much of a restriction. There's talk of devaluation of the property, which, as you know, we don't get involved in as planners or looking at tree protection. And again, there's talk of not being able to maintain the tree in a timely manner, but we support people with that all the time. So we don't think there's any sustainable objections there, and we would recommend that the committee confirms the order without modification.
Thank you very much, John, for that. What's the stop tour of that TPO? Any questions, colleagues? Any comments, colleagues? So we now proceed to the vote. Can I have all those voting against?
None, Chair.
Can I have all those not voting?
None, Chair.
Can I have those voting for?
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much, everyone. What I'm going to recommend is that remaining items are deferred to the next meeting. Is everyone agreed? Agreed. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone online. Thank you. Take care.